rites for worship. Many people are afraid to do puja, specific traditional rites for worship, because they feel they don't have enough training or don't understand the mystical principles behind it enough. To this concern, I would say that the priesthood in Hinduism is sincere, devout and dedicated. Most Hindus depend on the priests to perform the pujas and sacraments for them, or to train them to perform home puja and give them permission to do so through initiation, called diksha. However, simple pujas may be performed by anyone wishing to invoke grace from God, Mahadevas and Devas. Love and dedication and the outpouring from the highest chakras of spiritual energies of the lay devotee are often greater than any professional priest could summon within himself. Devotees of this caliber have come up in Hindu society throughout the ages with natural powers to invoke the gods and manifest in the lives of the temple devotees many wondrous miracles. There is also an informal order of priests called Pandara, which is essentially the self-appointed priests who is accepted by the community to perform pujas at a sacred tree, a simple shrine, or an abandoned temple. He may start with the mantra Aum and learn a few more mantras as he goes along. His effectiveness can equal that of the most advanced Sanskrit Shastri, performing in the grandest temple. The basic principle of worship in the theurgic practice is that it is not the ritual that appeals to the deity, but the consciousness of the person performing the ritual. Ritual is a tool to change consciousness. When consciousness changes, becomes sattvic, open and directed, divine energies descends, parjanya takes place, and the ritual becomes a blessing. As in a magic, the magic operation is not done by actions, but by the consciousness of the magician. The basic magic operation is done in the mind. Ritual actions are taken to produce a change in the consciousness. The key factor is the consciousness that operates with reality, the bhava that we are in. There are 4 types of bhava in worship, and that bhavas correspond to 4 types of padas: Charya, Kriya, Yoga and Jnani. Charya is performed in puja bhava. There are divisions in puja bhava between a person who is doing worship and the object of worship. Puja bhava is a ritual expressing honor and respect, and a person who does ritual wants to get some welfare and begs for that. At the level of Kriyapada, there is faith and devotion, and the worshipper is no longer asking the deity to fulfill his wish. He asks the deity for mercy, grace, in any form, and he does not set conditions for grace. This is Bhakti Bhava worship at the Kriyapada level. The worshipper surrenders to God without condition. He is no longer setting selfish conditions. Give me this or that. The next one, yoga bhava, means that the worshipper himself begins to unite with the deity. He performs the theurgic practice of visualization, japa, transformation of the winds and channels to receive grace and take the same form as the deity, to place the deity in the channels and chakras, to connect with him through dhyana, through bhava, through the key points, to attain the same grandeur as the deity, transform the features of the deity and anchor them with mantras, nyas, in your channels and chakras, be identified with the deity and walk like the deity. Guru, tell me please, if a devotee goes to dharma centers, to some common altar, on which state? On Yogapada. On the stage of Yogapada, of course. It is not an obstacle. In contrast, it helps, because when you are in a group, you turn your feelings inward and do your spiritual work. And finally, the jnanapada means worship in jnana bhava. This is not Vaishnava worship. It is Shaivite worship in jnanapada. Vaishnavas avoid jnanapada, but Shaivites, on the contrary, consider jnanapada to be the main condition of worship. In jnanapada, the principle applies that only Shiva can worship to Shiva. Only God can worship to God, that is, the one who is united with him in nature. In jnanapada, we have the same view as the deity. Deity remains in the samadhi of Aham Brahmasmi. To worship him with dignity, we have to take the same point of view, the same attitude, the same view. That is, Ganesha is Brahman. We sit in front of Ganesha and take the Aham Brahmasmi view, and I am also Brahman. Shiva is Brahman and Ishvara. We sit down and take the same Shivoham position, and after that we start worshipping in the spirit of non-duality. This is the Jnanapada. With the beginning of Shivapada, the true vision of reality as it is begins. Before that, there are obscurations. Karma mala, maya mala, anava mala, and the subject is unequal to the one he worships. In Jnanapada, the division into subject and object is removed. The subject and object become equivalent, and they are equivalent in the absolute. When worship is performed in the spirit of Jnana Bhava, the yogi is truly established in non-duality and moves toward an understanding of the principle of yoga bhogete mokshete samsarah. Yoga is bhoga and moksha is samsara. This expression is from the Kularnava Tantra, cannot be understood in the previous bhavas. Only by beginning to worship in Jnana Bhava at the level of Shivapada, we begin to see what is being said, because it is the statement of Siddhas, and Siddhas are the highest among people. The wisest are the eldest civilization among people. So Ishvara Pujana in the spirit of Jnana Bhava means that you have at least the Aham Brahmasmi view, perspective of Vedanta. That is, you have training of Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana, Panchakosha Viveka training, and you have discovered Turiya At least intellectually, it is also worth something that you have meditated on Mahavakya Tattvamasi and concluded the identity of Jiva and Ishvara, and can intellectually justify to your mind and try to act from that mindset and do worship from that view. At least there must be paroksha jnana. The presence of paroksha jnana points to jnana bhava and to shaivachara. The absence of paroksha jnana points to lower acharas and lower bhavas. After going through all these bhavas, we have to engender veneration and respect in puja bhava, engender faith and devotion at the level of kriya pada in bhakti bhava, and engender the yogic ability to visualize, to place deities in the channels. At the level of yoga pada, to be in dhyana on the deity, to concentrate. And then, at the level of jnana pada, we have to stop dwelling in view and contemplation. And from that point, our full-fledged puja, upasana, in the spirit of jnana bhava, in the spirit of jnana pada starts. We move to shaivachara. There is Ishvara Pujana, there is Yama Niyama, exactly in the Siddha tradition. But in the other traditions, there is no such requirement. There you can worship in the spirit of Vaishnavachara. I am a devotee, I am in duality, and the deity is always separate from me. Question. Om Guruji, but even in the Vaishnava tradition, there may be enlightened Siddhi masters. Why then is Jnana Bhava being cut off in worship? Because it might be in contradiction to the process of soul evolution and what is going on. It is not being cut off. There, as they say, jnani also attains liberation, dissolves into impersonal Brahman. But this is such a nightmare. What do they mean? They mean the pralaya kalas, and here we agree we are not in contradiction with them in this question. But one can mix and put together the pralaya kalas and those who are truly dissolved in Brahman, like butter in butter, milk in milk. Those who have acquired the body of wisdom, who have realized the nirguna aspect. And there it is put on one board. And there are enlightened people everywhere, sooner or later, those who have stayed in Vaishnavachara and at the level of dual bhakti bhava, they go to parabhakti, and parabhakti is nothing different from jnana. All differences go away later. They go, but later. So it is said like that, not to lose the intention to worship in non-dual perception for inexperienced, immature bhaktas. That is, there they are afraid to make the mistakes called loss of action in view. And at the level of Jnanapada in Shaivachara, we are not afraid of that. We inform about that at once. Yes, there is such tendency. You may become pralaikala, you may lose the action in the vision. But we warn about that. We are learning not to make such mistakes. We talk about relative and absolute truth, we explain it, and we are in all arms. It is better to know the truth from the very beginning than to discover it by trial and error painfully afterwards, decades later. Mothers, daughters, aunts, fathers, sons, uncles, all may perform puja within their own home, as the Hindu home is considered to be nothing less than an extension of a nearby temple. The home of every grihastha, of every karma sannyasi, is an extension of the nearest ashram, the nearest temple. It is a small temple, small ashram. It should have an altar. The principles of yama niyama, tantra samayas, and the spirit of devotion, of the upasana, must be applied there. In the Hindu religion, unlike the Western religions, there is no one who stands between man and God. Years ago, in the late 1950s, I taught beginning seekers how to offer the minimal, simplest form of puja at a simple altar with fresh water, flowers, small candle, incense, a bell and a stone. This brings together the four elements: earth, air, fire and water. In your own mind is Akasha, the fifth element. The liturgy is simply chanting Aum. This is the generic puja, which anyone can do before proper initiations comes from the right sources. People of any religion can perform puja in this way. All Hindus have guardian devas who live on the astral plane and guide, guard and protect their lives. The great Mahadevas in the temple, where the devotees frequent, send their deva ambassadors into their homes to live with the devotees. A room is set aside for these permanent unseen guests, a room that the whole family can enter and sit in and commune inwardly with these refined beings who are dedicated to protecting the family generation after generation. Some of them are their own ancestors. A token shrine in a bedroom, or a closet, or a niche in a kitchen is not enough to attract these divinities. One shouldn't host an honored guest in one's closet or have him or her sleep in the kitchen and expect the guest to feel welcome, appreciated, loved. The practitioner begins by having the murti printed out on A4 from the internet. You know, paper usually bends itself when it's without frame, and it is tapped to the wall and placed on the bookshelf with the book still there, but it is covered with some curtain. The altar begins like this, and after making the offerings with incense sticks, a practitioner should quickly open the window, not letting mother, father, neighbors feeling the smell. They might not like it, and make some puja in secret. And if one lives under special conditions, then he takes this murti off and hides them, and then comes home from work and put them up again. But after a month or years, there is a merit increase, spiritual strength, and the practitioner thinks, why don't I make multi-frames? Because it is more beautiful. A bright idea comes to his mind, inspired by the devas. He prints them out and begins to put up a beautiful shelf, and suddenly thinks, why didn't I do this before? He thought the altar was expensive, that it was something complicated. But it's not about money, it's about our connection, our vision. And then a monk comes to his house and says, why don't you put an altar on the whole wall? How? There's furniture here. So take it out. What do you need the furniture for? Does furniture gives you a merit? But the altar gives you a merit. And this kind of logic is astonishing. And the karma sannyasi thinks about it, and he starts rebuilding again. Definitely like this. and he finally gets a full-fledged, beautiful, homely altar. Suddenly he feels, what a grace, what a miracle I have in my home. And it is practically for free. On the contrary, he had to free himself from something. It's just an intention, outlook. Then every day he performs devotional service at home and he feels renewed every morning, every evening, and especially if he adds a little bit of standard of Ishvara Pujana. He feels some magic, jewel settles in his home, a treasure. He has an area of purity and grace, worship, connection with cosmos and deities, area of theurgic practice. From this point, the house becomes a temple. Changes occur, changes with relatives, at work, around, lying in asphalt or a new branch of electricity, planting bushes. Some positive changes are taking place, and also in the mind. There are the initial signs that your upasana is progressing. And then, either he lives in the apartment building, living on the 3rd floor, and just builds himself a separate house outside the city, makes a big altar with the big deities, and a new destiny begins. And he begins to live in an ashram, a new life starts. And that's what the blessings of the deities did. That's his upasana. The upasana gave him purity, strength, wisdom and grace. There was a change in a destiny. All Hindus are taught from childhood that the guest is God. And they treat any guest royally who comes to visit. Hindus also treat God as God and devas as gods when they come to live permanently in the home. But liberal sects of Hinduism teach that God and devas are only figments of one's imagination. These sects are responsible for producing a more materialistic and superficial group of followers. Materialistic, superficial Hindus feel that God might be living, sometimes maybe, in their house. Their homes are fraught with confusion, deceptive dealings, backbiting, anger, even rage. And their marriages nowadays often end in divorce. They and all those who live in the lower nature are restricted from performing puja, because when and if they do puja, the invocation calls up the demons rather than calling down the devas. Such person who is in a negative bhava, in rage, in anger, while making upasana, he shakes the subtle world with his bhava. And the devas do not come to his call, to his offerings. They do not respond, they do not accept. But the lower creatures don't mind coming to his puja, to his upasana, to feast on. But these inferior creatures don't bring grace. They may even fulfill his desires, some kind of spirits. But it won't be theurgy, it will be thaumaturgy, a magical operation. Therefore, purity of soul, right motivation, devotion are important. Then the altar in the house becomes the source of pure tattvas, pure vision, sublime divya bhava. The atmosphere in the house becomes saturated with pure tattvas and bhavas, so that just by being around, one becomes purified, accumulating merit. Light souls, spirits and devas come to the call of the bell. This is called prabodhana. They participate with the praying person in the chanting of bhajans, worship, and rejoice in it. Then they receive their share of offerings, which are offered to the chief deity as a retinue. The asuric beings, invoked in the home by angry people and into the temple by angry priests, or by contentious, argumentative, sometimes rageful boards of directors, take great satisfaction in creating more confusion and escalating simple misunderstandings into arguments leading to angry words, hurt feelings, and more. With this in mind, once anger is experienced, 31 days should pass to close the door on the chakras below the Muladhara, before puja may again be performed by that individual. Simple waving of incense before the icons is permissible, but not the passing of flames, ringing of bells, or the chanting of any mantra, other than the simple recitation of Aum. Living in God's home. The ideal of Ishvara Pujana, worship, is to always be living with God, living with Shiva, in God's house, which is also your house, and regularly going to God's temple. This lays the foundation for finding God within. How can someone find God within if he doesn't live in God's house as a companion to God in his daily life? The concept of the home altar, pujakara, the altar room, in the house of karma sannyasi or in an ashram, is the concept of devaloka, the concept of initial liberation. When the devotee, worshipper, considers himself as the retinue of the deity, and the deity resides in the center. Who remembers how this type of liberation is called? Yes, the concept of acquiring salokya mukti. That house in which the deity is installed, the altar, the pujakar, and the place for worship, is the divine loka. It is the mandala of the deity. And the deity in it is the principal, respected, honored creature. And all those living in that house are his attendants, his devotees, his worshippers, his disciples. Gradually, one who performs upasana comes to such a vision and moves towards salokya mukti. Salokya mukti is obtained in charyapada, even if you perform ritualized acts with respect, but no more than that. Samipya mukti, closeness to the deity, is obtained in kriyapada. Sarupya mukti is obtained in yogapada. Sayujya mukti is obtained in jnanapada. How can someone find God within if he doesn't live in God's house as a companion to God in the daily life? The answer is obvious. It would be only a theoretical pretense, based mainly on egoism. If one really believes that God is in his house, what kinds of attitudes does this create? First of all, since family life is based around food, the family would feed God in his own room at least 3 times a day, place the food lovingly before his picture, leave, close the door, and let God and his devas eat in peace. God and the devas do enjoy the food, but they do so by absorbing the pranas, the energy of the food. When the meal is over, and after the family has eaten, God's plates are picked up too. What is left on God's plate is eaten as prasada, as a blessing. God should be served as much as the hungriest member of the family, not just a token amount. The Vipassana instructions tell you how much you should offer to the God's image. And here's the answer. As much as you would offer a young boy of 16 for him to have enough. The food we eat is prasad. Prasad is the divine mercy, that which is left over the offering of the deity. We give prasad, then we take it away, and it does not diminish in the plate. So what does the deity eat? Prana. The high deities do not need our offerings to be fed. They are not hungry, they do not eat earthly food. They are fulfilled with the divine source, bhava. But the deities of our mind that arise in worship, our ideal perceptions, this is what we feed on with our devotion. After all, the statue on the altar, the deity of our mind, that has been called into the statue through the prana pratishtha ritual, and the higher cosmic deities that send their avesha, anugraha to these deities, they become one. When we eat prasad, we eat it as a blessing, as an indication that we have received blessings, as an affirmation of blessings. Food nourishes physically, but blessings nourish the soul, the subtle body. Of course, gods and the devas do not always remain in the shrine room. They wander freely throughout the house, listening to and observing the entire family, guests and friends. Since the family is living in God's house, and God is not living in their house, the voice of God is easily heard as they are conscious. When we are living in God's house, it is easy to see God as pure energy and life within every living form, the trees, the flowers, the plants, the fire, the earth, humans, animals, and all creatures. When we see this life, which is manifest most in living beings, we are seeing God Shiva. Many families are too selfish to set aside a room for God. Though they have their personal libraries, rumpus rooms, 2 living rooms, multiple bedrooms, their superficial religion borders on a new Indian religion. Their shrine is a closet or picture of God and goddesses on the vanity mirror of their dressing table. The results of such worship are nil, and their life reflects the chaos that we see in the world today. The psychology and the decision and the religion is, do we live with God, or does God occasionally visit us? Who is the authority in the home, an unreligious, ignorant, domineering elder? Or is it God Shiva himself, or Lord Murugan, or Lord Ganesha, whom the entire family, including elders, bow down to, because they have resigned themselves to the fact that they are living in the ashram of Mahadevas. This is religion, this is Ishvara Pujana. In the tradition of Sanatana Dharma, we do not just live in some ordinary place, but every place in which we live is the place of God. The earth is also a great ashram, the place of God. The house in which we live is the place of God. We respect the altar and the place itself by keeping it clean. As we purify our minds, we can realize that the entire universe is God's place, and the altar is located at every point in the universe. It can be projected anywhere, anytime. Into the past, into the future, into the present, into a sesame seed, into an entire galaxy. It is the capacity of our consciousness that increases when our pure vision is unobstructed. It is often said that worship is not only a performance at a certain time of a day, in a certain place, but a state of being in which every act, morning to night, is done in Shiva consciousness, in which life becomes an offering to God. The real meaning of Ishvara Pujana is the instantaneous second-to-second worship that is independent of the house, the temple, the altar, and the ritual activities. And such supreme worship is the principle of sahaja. Staying in nididhyasana, staying in sahaja, contemplating Brahman, it is worship with all available actions of body, speech and mind. Peaceful, neutral, angry in their five manifestations, in the moment of creation, maintains destruction, veiling and liberation. Thus, the true jnana yogi, laya yogi, performs Ishvara Pujana instantaneously in all 45 types of activity, in 9 self-liberations and 5 actions. The body, speech and mind produce peaceful, neutral and angry actions, or tamasic actions, in 5 types of activity. 9 multiplied by 5 is 45 types of activities. Instant worship. To be in instantaneous worship, we have to be always focused on the object of our worship, Nirguna Brahman, the formless God. Likewise, in the case of certain practices on Saguna Brahman, on Ishtadevata, which represents an aspect of Sakal, Brahman who has taken form. So the practice is a combination of worshipping Nirguna Brahman through self-liberation, natural state, integration, being in Bhairava, Krama, Shambhavi, Chanchari, Bhuchari Mudras, and worshipping the image of Nama and Rupa through the practice of Ishtadevata Yoga, Manasik Puja, Inner Puja, and Bahya Puja, the outer Puja. Then we can begin to see Shiva in everyone we meet. When we try, just try, and we don't have to be successful all the time, to separate the life of the individual from his personality. Immediately we are in a higher consciousness and can reflect contentment and faith, compassion, steadfastness, and all the higher qualities, which is sometimes not possible to do if we are looking only at the external person. This practice of Ishvara Pujana sadhana can be performed all through the day and even in one's dreams at night. Such worship dissipates the 5th state of consciousness. As you know, there are 4 states of consciousness: Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti and Turiya. But some people say that there is also a 5th one, and it is not Turyatita. The 5th one is called Mudha Avastha. Mudha means fool, donkey. That is a state of ignorance, forgetfulness of the true nature. Such worship always dissipates Mudha Avastha, because Jagrat, wakefulness, being in clarity, when God is already remembered, at least at the level of vision. Meditation, too, in the Hindu way is based on worship. It is true that Hindus do teach meditation techniques to those who have Western backgrounds as a mind-manipulative experience. However, a Hindu adept, rishi or jnani, even an experienced elder, knows that meditation is a natural outgrowth of the charya, kriya, and yoga paths. It is based on a religious foundation, as trigonometry is based on geometry, algebra, and arithmetic. If you are worshipping properly, if you take worship to its pinnacle, you are in a perfect meditation. We have seen many devotees going through the form of worship with no communication with the god they are worshipping, or even the stone that the god uses as a temporary body. They don't even have a smile on their face. They are going through the motions because they have been taught that meditation is the ultimate, and worship can be dispensed with after a certain time. Small wonder that when they are in meditation, their minds are confused and subconscious overloads harass them. Breathing is irregular, and if made regular, has to be forced. Their materialistic outlook on life, of seeing God everywhere, yet not in those places they rationalize God can never possibly be, contradicts their professed dedication to the Hindu way of life. Yes, truly, worship unreservedly. Perfect this. Then, after initiation, eternalize that worship through yoga practices given by a Sadguru. Through that same eternal worship, unreservedly, you will eventually attain the highest goal. These are the Shaiva Siddhanta conclusions of the 7 rishis who live within the Sahasrara chakra of all souls. Saguna Upasana is the external worship, Bahya Punja, what is called Nama and Rupa. Nirguna Upasana is contemplation in Jnana Yoga, Nididhyasana. There is no contradiction between them. They complement each other, being essentially one. This principle is called Murta-Murta, personal and impersonal. It does not mean that something personal is separate, something impersonal is separate, having form is separated, and non-having form is separated. If you don't know how to combine form and formless, absolute and relative truth, you will always be in contradiction. The formless Brahman will be somewhere far away, the deity with form will be here, and these will be different states of consciousness. But when we practice illusory body yoga, Ishtadevata yoga, we teach, on the contrary, how to connect absolute and relative truth, form and emptiness. And so we say of the 2 aspects of deity. The deity has 2 aspects, not one. The first is the aspect of his name and form, and the second is the aspect of emptiness and pure light. And through the name and form of the deity, we accumulate merit. And due to the emptiness and pure light, we gain wisdom. So, contact with the deity gives 2 accumulations, with the deity in form, merit, and wisdom. So it is assumed that when we look at Dattatreya, at Shiva, at Ganesha, at Lakshmi, we catch these 2 aspects always. We capture exactly these 2 aspects. We do not look only at their form. We look at Ganesha and think, this is the infinite emptiness, this is the infinite light of non-devalence, this is Brahman. Then we look at his form, think, in one hand, he has a lasso, a hook, in other, an Ankush, God, with which elephants are urged, that is, immature souls are urged to the truth. His left hand holds the modaka as the fruit of the grace of merit, nectar of bliss, and his other hand gives fearlessness. And we ponder his relational qualities, purifying ourselves through contemplation of the form. Thus, deity unites emptiness, pure light, and form. And each form is a certain power and energy. Form points on Shakti energy. The trident of Shiva means three energies, jnana, ichha, and kriya. And then Shiva himself is both emptiness and jnana, ichha, kriya manifesting from emptiness and light. And then it becomes clear to us how the energy comes from emptiness. Guruji could also visualize the six-handed form of Ganesha, where he has an axe, lotus in other variant, without any problems. Even there is 32-handed. What does the three-handed Ganesha form mean? As everywhere else, the three-headed point to the three aspects of absolute truth. The three gunas, three gods, three states of consciousness that they control. There is a five-headed form of Shiva called Mahasadashiva. Not five-headed, but 5 times 5 heads. 25-headed. A huge number of hands, attributes, heads. All of this can also be visualized. Each attribute, each hand, is a certain power, Shakti. And then we understand that emptiness and light are continuously manifested as energy, and each deity has its own type of energy, is indicated by its hands and attributes. So, when we have already done Sankhya-upasana, it's time for prasadam and another mantra from the Yoga of Daily Life, which you all know, that we read before prasadam. So, prasad is laid on the table, and we chant the following mantra for consecration.
Brahmarpanam Brahmahari Brahmanau Brahmanahutam Brahmevate Ragantavya Brahmakarma Samadhina Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Dehamashritaha Pranapana Samayuktaha Pacham Yannam Chaturvidham Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
And what dhyana is performed here? First, we meditate in the non-dual view, contemplating that all food, all offerings, ourselves, are all Brahman. That is, food is Brahman, the person eating is Brahman, the process of eating is also Brahman. Then we meditate on Ishvara, which resides in all living beings and consumes this food.